Okay, my lovely people. Well, I want to say thank you and well done for... I'm a bit loud. Do you think I'm a bit loud? Oh, okay. Well, I won't turn myself down. I want to say thank you so much for coming to join tonight, particularly braving the rain. I think there's something special about people who brave the rain. It shows that you are keen as mustard. Well, considering I'm here and I'm not an idiot, therefore you can't be, Manuela. So I also want to welcome those who are joining on the live stream, of which there are a couple, because I just let people know about it. And I know that several people who can't come here tonight have indicated that they're going to watch these episodes, these two sessions, because they really do want to know about what we're talking about tonight. So like last week, we're going to break up tonight into two sessions, around about 20 minutes or so for each session. We're going to start by discussing some really important things in the first session, and then we're going to apply them and the four-step process that we talked about last week. We're going to apply that in the second session. As we do that, you're probably going to automatically start applying it to the dream that you wrote down. Did you write down a dream? Why don't you pull that out? And while you're pulling that out, the workbook that I just gave you actually covers tonight and next Wednesday's evening. So I put them together so that they go through. So you'll see there's a bit of a dividing page. But tonight we're going to be dealing with the next section. So as we progress through, let's have a little talk about what we're going to do tonight, and we'll recap a little bit about what we did last week. So you're going to remember, I'm just going to kind of refresh your mind that we talked about how dreams are a very perfectly normal human experience that goes in every culture all around the world. They are important for our emotional development, for our mental development, for our physical, even our physical bodies they're important for, and for our spiritual development as well. They're all part of the way God created us. Although we're somewhat light in numbers tonight, there is nothing unscientific about honouring and taking note of your dreams, and the desire to understand your dreams is also a very academically astute discipline and practice to do. There's nothing unscientific, even though many people in the world just ignore their dreams. But as we learnt last week, even some of the most well-known scientists throughout history have honoured and taken note of their dreams. We read last week, we read in Job chapter 33 that God has said categorically that he will speak to his children through their dreams. He won't just speak in an ignorant way, he'll speak directly and specifically with purpose through our dreams. So we can have every confidence that when we dream at night, there is a very strong chance that God is speaking through that dream. And we're going to learn about a little bit more about that in a minute. We also learned that there were different types of dreams, and each of the different types of dreams have different purposes. And we also realised we gave ourselves a little bit of patience, and as we recognise that learning to understand our dreams is a little bit like learning a new language. We can't expect to be just fluent in it immediately, overnight. We'll begin to understand the more we practice it and the more attention we give to them, but it is a process. It's something that we get better at over time. Well, what are we going to do tonight? Well, I'd like to definitely go through the 4-step process, but before we go through the 4-step process, there's 2 things that I want to talk about in this session before we get to the 4-step process. I want to discuss how do we know whether a dream is specifically inspired by God or whether a dream is just us lying down and our soul, our mind, our will, our emotions are just, throwing about ideas and it's completely from human origin. There's also another origin where dreams may come from. What do you reckon? From the devil. Yeah, particularly if you've opened yourself up to watching quite horrific scenes either on television or games or through other stimulating ways in the world. Definitely dreams can come from the enemy, and we'll talk more about that in the last session next week. But I want us to spend some time talking about how do we know whether a dream has been inspired by God? Because those kinds of dreams have very unique characteristics. And then after that, we'll go in the next session and look at those 4-step processes of understanding each dream, and we'll have a look at a biblical example for that. Okay, well, let's have a think about when I say that God speaks through our dreams, which he definitely does, I'm not saying that for every person in the world, God speaks categorically in every single dream we have. That's actually not what I'm saying. Because dreams, as we know, have a multiple of different purposes in our life, and they can often be us lying down, we visualize something, we ponder it, and it just goes out of our mind, and it's not necessarily a specific God encounter. So I want us to, as a way of understanding how do we know whether our dreams are from God, I want to give you some distinct characteristics of God-inspired dreams, and then that will shed light on how we can differentiate them from the other types of dreams. In your workbook, these are all listed, but I'm going to go through them one by one and talk about how we know whether a dream is from God. I think this is probably on page maybe 2 or 3 in your book. Can you see it? Okay, let's go. There are 8 characteristics of a dream that comes from God, or a dream that God is using very vividly. The first one is particularly for a Christian or a believer or someone who believes in God, if they are experiencing a reoccurring or a repetitive dream that happens over and over and over again, it is definitely God trying to get your attention to alert you to the fact that something needs your attention. So he's trying to alert. It's a bit like an alarm clock that goes off, and that dream won't stop until you give it the attention and discern from the Lord what it is he's trying to bring to your attention. So reoccurring and repetitive dreams are definitely from God. Other ones is, and we see this right throughout the Bible, dreams that are inspired by God tend to have a very specific message, i.e. they tend to be clearer than your normal dream. They tend to be a dream that you wake up, you think, wow, that was an important dream, and I have a bit of an inkling of what it's about. It has a specific message, and it's a message that you know, there's a knowing that it's a message that God is trying to get through to you. The way that you know is, remember we talked about last week that when a person puts Jesus as their Lord and Saviour or in the boss of their life, God the Father gives his Spirit to be attached to our spirit in our heart. So that means that when we are a child of God, we belong to God, his Spirit is in our heart. And his Spirit, the Holy Spirit in our heart, speaks or witnesses or communicates with our spirit. Now, we sometimes call that a gut knowing, our conscience. We're aware, oh, this isn't good for us to do, or I just know that I know that I know. Those kinds of feelings, we call them the inner witness. And all kinds of people have them. Some people it will be stronger than others. But when we have a God-inspired dream, it will resonate, or it will witness with our spirit that this is something from God that we need to take notice of. God always works with us, particularly when we are his children. The next characteristic is that there will be some very strong element that one of God's promises is ringing out through the dream. So it will highlight or bring to our attention a promise of God or the presence of God within the dream. Now, that may initially be a little bit hard to discern, but with practice, and the more you know the promises of God, the more you wake up, you think, man, that was a really powerful dream. And the more you think and meditate on it or think through it, you think, I think God is trying to remind me of this. And that's often one of the characteristics. That goes with the next one, i.e. a promise of God and the presence of God resonates through the dream very strongly. The next one, which I've already mentioned, is dreams from God tend to be more simple to understand and more clear. They're not dreams that you wake up and go, oh my goodness, that was so confusing, I feel disorientated and I don't know what I'm on about. That's not from God. How do we know that's not from God? Well, because God has actually said in his word that he is the author. He's not the author of confusion, but he is the author of a sound mind. So that means that the dreams that he gives, when he gives instructions to us, are clear and direct, so we know and can have confidence in obeying them. So that's another important characteristic. The next one is that there seems to be an understanding, this is from God, I think I know what he's trying to communicate to me. And the final one is that you wake up with a sense of, yes, I have the confidence and the peace in knowing this is the right thing to do. This is the right response. Jesus promised before he left earth, I will give you my peace, not like the world. I'll give you my peace, and that peace will guide you. And so when we have a dream from God, it will be accompanied by his peace, and we will know how we can live out that or work through that. Now, how are we going to challenge this or contrast this to the two other places that dreams may come from? The first one I've listed here are demonic dreams. You would be surprised at the number of people who have demonic dreams or dreams that are inspired by the devil. They have very specific characteristics. They tend to be quite very disturbing, very oppressive. They tend to cause a lot of fear, so much so that a person gets almost gripped and powerless to do anything. Have you ever had a dream where you couldn't speak or you couldn't move, your limbs wouldn't move, or you wanted to shout but nothing came out? Those kinds of dreams really show that the devil has taken hold of some aspect of your life and you're not walking in the power of God in that area. It's very revealing. They're actually quite disturbing dreams because they reveal that you're feeling vulnerable and powerless in certain situations. But that's one of the characteristics of a dream that is inspired by the enemy. Some of the others I've listed there will be, where have I written there? They'll be very accusative. So you'll wake up feeling, oh my goodness, I'm a horrible person, I'm not worth anything. They'll be dehumanizing, they'll be self-condemning, they will have none of the characteristics that you know you have a hold on in your relationship with God. Sometimes people call dreams from the enemy as nightmares. They may not necessarily all be nightmares, but certainly they are dreams that are so disturbing that you really wake up in a panic. That's one of their characteristics. Now, they're dreams from the devil. What about dreams that arise from our soul? There are those kinds of dreams. How do we know them? Well, they tend to be very self-focused. They tend to be very ambitious. They tend to be deceptive in a way. In other words, they're saying something about you that is actually not true. Because as you know, the Bible says that the heart of humans is very deceptive. It's very self-deceptive. We can trick ourselves into believing stuff that actually is not true. And so dreams that arise from the soul can be very deceptive, and they can sometimes be a dream or a want that we turn into a dream because we want it to come to pass. It's a human-inspired dream. So they're dreams from the soul. Okay, well, I know I've confused you a little bit. Don't worry. I wanted to outline though, because as you have dreams, you can refer back and you can test it and compare it with some of these characteristics, and you'll have a better understanding of where the dream is arising from. We can talk about that a little bit later. Oh, that's what I've just talked about just then. Okay, what are most of our dreams about? Well, one of the things that I like to reassure people is that God loves being involved in every area of our life. Many people who are believers or who are Christians, before they go to bed, they'll pray. They'll talk to God. They may talk to God about their day. They may talk to God about a situation that they're worried about or they're concerned about, or they may just talk to God about how they're feeling. When they dream, often the dream relates to the very situation or concern that they had in the forefront of their mind as they went to sleep. Now, it may be that it's in a visual story or a visual parable. It may be that the symbols are very depicted in different ways, but most dreams we have are regarding or represent the main concerns that we have in our everyday life. They're mainly about us. Manuela, are you okay? Yeah? Do you want a drink of water? Okay. So they're mainly about the concerns that we have in our everyday life. Yes, we can get dreams that, show us the future. Yes, we can get dreams about other things that are going to take place. But most dreams are about the relationships that we're in and the situations that we're facing in our everyday life. Now, I'm often asked, is the dream that I'm seeing for me, or is the dream that I'm seeing for someone else? And this is particularly when someone we know turns up in our dream and they call up and, oh, I had a dream about you. Suddenly we think that the dream is about us. Oh, tell us what happened. We want to know what happened in the dream. I want to differentiate between the two because I hope you don't have, oh yes, I dreamed you were pregnant. And they'll go, oh, that's going to be a bit hard. So let's have a think about what's the difference. There is a very clear way that we can tell whether a dream is about us or whether it is a dream about someone else. Most dreams that we have are about us. And the way we know that is because we are participating in the dream. So we're interacting with people, We may be being chased by something. We're doing something. We are like an actor or a participant in the scenario that's being played out. And that's how we know the dream is about us. It may be that other people we know are in the dream, but the dream doesn't necessarily relate to them and an interaction that we're having with them in our waking life. So let's say, for example, I had a dream where Helen came into my dream, and I was having a conversation with Helen in my dream, and I woke up in the morning. The dream was definitely about me because I was having a conversation with Helen. It wasn't necessarily about anything to do with Helen. It was more, what does Helen represent to me? So who does Helen represent to me, and what am I learning through that? However, sometimes we have a dream where we are not participating at all. We are watching a scenario play out. A bit like we're watching a movie, in other words. We're watching it, it's playing out, and we're just sitting there. Now, that movie may be making us feel frightened, it may be making us feel stressed, apprehensive, but we're just watching it. Those dreams tend to be about something independent from us. Now, it may be that God is trying to show us something that is happening and how we respond to it, but those dreams tend to be about something else independent. Now, let's paint two biblical examples of these. There's many of them, but I'll do two examples. Do you remember when Abraham had the dream at night and God showed him the stars up in the sky and asked him to count it, and the sand on the ground? The dream was about God speaking to Abraham, and Abraham had to do something. He had to look up into the sky, he had to try and count all the stars. Because he was the major participant in the dream was about him, his life, and the promises that God had for him. Okay? But a little bit later, we read about I believe it's King Nebuchadnezzar, and he has a dream about a statue, and the statue has different features. It had a head of iron, feet of bronze, and there was silver in there, and there were other things coming along and destroying the idol, the statue, and so forth. Because King Nebuchadnezzar wasn't participating, he was just watching this, that dream was about the rise and fall of kingdoms independent of him. He wasn't involved in that dream. Now, he did have another dream in which he saw a big tree and the birds came and everything, and he was interacting it. That was a dream about him, but he was interacting in the dream. So does that help a little bit about how to tell the difference between the two? Okay, right. Well, it's time for me to go through very, very quickly our 4-step process. Then we're going to have a break. Then we're going to grab out the dream that we wrote down, and I'm going to go through them step by step more slowly using one of the dreams in the Bible, and then we're going to apply it to the dream that we wrote down. So I'm going to go through the 4-step process now, just quickly. Then we'll have a little bit break. Then we're going to come back and go through it more slowly. You go through this 4-step process every dream you have. So let's say you go to bed, you have a dream. Before you get up in the morning, or if you're better at remembering your dreams, you get up in the morning and you write your dream down in as much detail as possible. Everything you remember, how you felt, what you were doing, the colours, the images, whether there were creatures, whether there were people, you write it down in as much detail as possible. Then you go through a 4-step process. The first process is you say, where was I? Where was I? What was the opening scene? Was I in my house? Was I in the desert? Was I in my car? Was I driving a bus? Was I in the desert? Where was I? Okay, what was the opening scene? The opening scene is very much like the map that tells you what the theme of the dream is. We'll talk about that soon. Next, you're going to ask, what was I doing in the dream? What was the primary action in the dream? Were you running? Were you rushing? Were you stressed? Were you frightened? Were you crying desperately? What were you doing in the dream? Next, what were you feeling in the dream? What do you remember was the dominant feeling in the dream? Were you frightened? Were you sad? Were you happy? Were you hopeful? Were you, it may be you were stressed. What was the primary feeling that you remember in the dream? You're going to hold on to that. And then the last one is try and identify what are the primary symbols that if you took the symbol out of the dream, the whole thing would fall apart. Some of our dreams are quite complicated. So in other words, you could have a very long dream where you start here and you end up over here and you've been through about 5 million different places all in the one go. Sometimes people's dreams are quite complicated. Other people's dreams are they're just one little scenario. But most times when there is a dream, there'll be dominant symbols that you could almost say, well, the dream was about this, and this kept appearing in my dream over and over and over again. That's a dominant symbol, and you want to take note of it because that's the symbol that you need to try and understand. What does that symbol represent to me? And we'll talk about that more. Once you've identified this, and what I got you to do in your little sheet is I got you to circle it in different colours because that then started to get you to notice certain things in the dream. Once you've identified all of that, let's say I had a dream where, and I used to have this dream a lot when I worked, is I would be on my way to work, but I never seemed to get to work. That something always caused me to be delayed. So the train didn't arrive, or my clothes didn't fit, or I lost my watch, or someone came up and pulled me away. So I was on my way to work, but I never got to work. And this would just, this would go on and on and on and on and on, and I'd kind of wake up in a panic because I'm a bit of a, goal-orientated person, and I didn't like the fact that I wasn't getting to work. And so if I was going to get up, I'd write all that down, I couldn't get to work and all these things were stopping me, I would say, how was I feeling? I was feeling frustrated that I was constantly being delayed. Everybody was pulling me away from what I knew I needed to do. I was being pulled back from what I needed to do. What will you do? I was trying to do what I knew needed to be done. So I was trying to get to where I knew I needed to go. And then what are the dominant symbols? Well, the symbols definitely about my work life. So about something to do with my work life and my career, because it was the journey from home to work, okay? So as I talk about all that, I then think in my waking life, where are those feelings and those actions present? Where do I hear myself or know that I'm feeling those in my waking life? Now, at the time that I was having that dream, I was aware that I actually needed to finish off that work and go and work somewhere else. And so it was almost like I felt like I was being held back and I wasn't able to progress and go on and do what I knew I needed to do. I was being held back. And so it's that feeling of being held back that's being represented in the dream. So keep your dream in your mind. We're now going to have a little bit of a break. We're going to stretch our legs, wriggle around, and then we're going to go through each step a little bit more slowly. But I want you to start thinking about the dream you wrote down, whether it's becoming a little bit more clearer what that dream was about. Okay? Let's go and have a bit of a cup of tea. How did you go writing down your dream? Did you find that Okay, how are we going, guys? You're not dripping. Sharon, are you dripping, are you? Did you get something to eat? I just don't want to hold us too long. Okay, we are back for session 2. Right. Okay then, we are going to have a look at our 4-step process. But we're going to go through them just a little bit slower, and I've got a story or two to tell about ways in which these steps play out in people's lives. So the first one that we're going to do is we're going to look at the opening scene. We're then going to move on to the primary action, the primary emotion, the primary symbols, and then we're going to overlay it with our waking life. The opening scene has been described by some people as like the map or the key of a treasure map. It reveals to us what the general theme of the overall dream is all about. So when someone says to you, oh, I had a dream, they said, oh, what was it about? Rather than saying what was it about, ask them, oh, where were you? Where were you in the dream? Where did you start? How did you start? Where were you at the beginning of your dream? Because that's the key that unlocks the rest of the dream as it's playing out. All the pictures and the scenarios that play out tie often to the opening scene. If you have different dreams, if you have like 3 different dreams throughout the night, they will often all relate to the same kind of scenario, but just be represented in a different way. Normally they will relate to the same kind of scenario though. They won't be about all different things that's happening in your life. Generally, they all are consistent. When we look at the opening scene, the first place that we need to relate that scene is to God's word. So for example, if we know that the dream, let's think about one thing that is very obvious. A lot of people have a dream and they're in their home, they're in their house. Sometimes people will be either in the house they're currently living in or the house they grew up in. Yeah? That is actually a very, very common thing. So let's think about ourselves. What does our house represent in the Bible? Do you remember Jesus told a story about 2 people who built their house on, one on the rock and one of the sand? And what did the house represent in that parable? Do you remember? That's right. It was about your life, your personhood. And so when we dream about our house, we are dreaming about our inward life. Our inward life, that the part of us that's inward that we can't see with our physical eyes, but it's our inward part, our own life. And then we can even go even more than that. That's just a general understanding. We can even step even more. And the story that I'm going to tell you in a little while will just blow your mind away. The dream that the house is often a dream that is depicting what's going on in our spiritual, emotional, and our mental lives. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But if you had a dream, that you were moving house, so you were in the process of moving from one house to another, that would mean that you were in a season of transition and you were moving from one place into a new season of life where you're going to be in a new place with new surroundings and new relationships. If you are dreaming about the home that you grew up in, it is revealing to you that there are lessons and relationships and memories that you haven't lived through in that time of your life that need your attention because they're currently impacting your present life. So memories of the home you grew up with, your parents, your grandparents. This is very much the case if you dream about grandparents that have passed on or parents that have passed on and they come back and talk to you. That will often represent that there are lessons or memories or scenarios that need to be looked at because they are impacting your present day life. Okay? Now, I'm going to have to talk a little bit louder because the rain's coming down. The only reason why God shows you those things in the past, so that the home you grew up with, is so that he can bring healing to your life. Sharon, do you want to just close the door? Because it's just going to be a bit loud with that rain coming down. Thanks. So, when we get a picture of us in the home that we grew up in, maybe relating with our parents or relatives or even people that have passed, the reason the Lord is bringing that to our attention is because he wants us to heal us in that area so that we are not held back by those memories in our waking life and into the future. That's why the Lord brings back memories of past scenarios, so he can bring healing to our life. But let's have a look, even with our home, think of the different rooms and what happens in those rooms. So if you were to have a dream about your front yard, the front yard of your home, that dream would often be about how you present to the world. Because that's the part of our house that everybody sees. So how you present to the world, your public front, in other words, how you are perceived on by other people will be the front yard. The backyard, however, will be revealing things that really only you and close friendships will know about. So that would be about your personal life, the relationships you have with other people. But even if we step into the home, if you dream that you're in your bedroom, it is most likely you're dreaming about relationships with intimate partners, or your relationship with Jesus, because he's a very personal relationship, but it's all about intimacy. If you come and you're in the living room, well then that's where you entertain, that's where you relate with people. If you dream about going up into the attic, it's often about your thinking, your mindset, because that's where up in the top where our brain is. If you're dreaming about the roof of your house, it's all about your protection, what's protecting you. And if you dream about going into the basement of the house, it's all about the foundations of your life. What's going on and what needs. So if you've got a dream in which there are, like rats and pests down in the basement of your life, it means that some evil presence has been able to get into the foundations of your life and need to be dealt with. So that's how, in terms of our home. Now I'm going to tell you a story. I was blown away when I heard this story. A lady had a dream about entering her house and she smelled smoke. She went upstairs looking for the fire, but she couldn't find any. She went downstairs and she couldn't find any there. She entered into the kitchen where the smell was stronger, and she opened up one of the upper kitchen cabinets and the flames leapt out at her. Although at the time she didn't understand what was this dream actually all about, 2 months later she went to the doctor and she found out that she had an intestine ailment that was diagnosed, an inflammation of the intestines. And it was a stress-related issue that she was put on medication to help. Well, as she began to learn about how your home in your dreams represent your inward life, she saw how the two related. Because the kitchen is where we prepare and digest our food, and it's where we actually prepare and nourish ourselves, nourish our lives. So she found out it wasn't the lower intestines where the inflammation was, it was the upper intestines, because it was the upper kitchen cabinets where the fire was. I thought that was amazing. Anyway, a little while later, when she learnt about this, she had the dream again. And she recognised immediately that if she didn't do something about the stress that she was under, she would once again have to go back and get on medication for the inflammation of her intestines. So the Lord was revealing to her through her dream that the stress that she had in her life needed to be addressed, otherwise it would have a physical ramification in her life, which I just blew my mind away when I read that. So that's about the opening scene. If you have dreams about being in school, a lot of people have dreams about going back to school and sitting exams. It's often because you're in a place where you need to learn something, and there is a lesson that you need to learn in order to be able to move on to the next part of your life. That's a common dream that people have. Okay, let's move on to the primary action in the dream. What were you doing in the dream? Well, we're going to look at a biblical example now, and we're going to see how it plays out. In Judges, the book of Judges, chapter 7, we learn about, or we meet a man named Gideon. Does anyone know about Gideon? Gideon was he was a farmer of a sycamore trees. I mean, he was a nobody, really. He was a nobody. But God called him to be a warrior and to fight against another army, quite a big, impenetrable army called the Midianites. Now, Gideon, because he really wasn't a man of war at all, was very apprehensive about going to war against this major army. And so he was worried about it. He didn't know what he should do. And God had purposely made the Israelite army, God's army, as small as it possibly could be. And the Midianite army were absolutely humongously huge. We read about in chapter 7 that to Gideon, the Midianites were as numerous as locusts, and their camels were without number. They were as numerous as the sands on the seashore. And Gideon's army was only 300 men. So we're talking about two different armies. God had told Gideon that he needed to go out and fight. And Gideon had said, "You've got to be joking. We've only got 300 men. How can we possibly win this battle?" So God said, "I want you to go down to the camp, because he has given you the enemy into your hands. I've given you the enemy, so I want you to go into the camp." So Gideon went down to the camp, and when he was down in the camp, he said, "I want you to take along one of your servants with you so that you can listen to what they're saying down in the camp." So he kind of crept down, under, like spying, into the camp and listened to what the Midianites were saying about the Israelites. When he went down there, they arrived and they overheard a conversation between two Midianite soldiers. This is the big army. They were recounting a dream that they had. And this was the dream. "I had this strange dream," he was saying. "There was a huge loaf of barley bread that came tumbling down into our camp. It hit our tent and it knocked us out flat." The other soldier replied, "Your dream can only mean one thing. Gideon, the son of Joash, the Israeli, is going to come and massacre all the allied forces of the Midianites." Well, when Gideon heard this little conversation between these two soldiers, he was so encouraged, he said, "Praise God, we are going to completely triumph over this gigantic army." And they went out, and it happened exactly as they did. Well, there are so many lessons we can learn from this little scenario. The thing that I really love, however, is that when the man said, "Oh, I had this strange dream about this, the barley loaf came down," the other guy didn't say, "Oh, for crying out loud, are you an idiot?" No, not at all. He listened to it. He knew exactly what it meant. That's what I find amazing. They were a lot better at dream interpretation back then than we are now. Anyway, so he knew it, they honoured it, and Gideon, from the dream of the enemy, was completely encouraged by what he'd heard. I find that quite fascinating. But let's step through and have a look at how do we know and the four-step process. The opening scene of the dream, well, it was definitely about them being in their tents, in their camp, so it was about the battle. It was about the battlefield because they were in their tents, in their camp. So that's what the dream was going to be about. The action, something came into the camp, came down the hill and flattened the tents. So it was about defeat and the tents being destroyed. We know that because that's obviously how it played out. The primary emotion, well, the dreamer, the person who dreamed, was absolutely petrified. They knew that they were going to be defeated. So they were worried and they were fearful. They knew they were going to be defeated. What were the primary symbol? Well, in this particular dream, the primary symbol was a barley loaf, a loaf of barley bread. Now, when we think of that, we think, that's a bit weird. Well, it is weird, but it's very, very significant. The barley loaf, the loaf of barley, was a very, very cheap grain. It was the kind of grain that only the poor ate. It wasn't well recognised, it wasn't well regarded, and it was something that no one would think a barley loaf could conquer or defeat anything with. I mean, if I was going at a sword fight with you and I held up a baguette and I went, "Right, let's have it out," you would not be worried, would you? No. So the Midianites, in fact, were not worried at all about the Israelis because they thought, we have so many numbers. But then this guy has a dream about something as insignificant as a barley loaf coming down the hill and flattening them. It was God showing Gideon, although it was the dreamer of the Midianites, it was God showing Gideon that he could defeat the Midian army even though the Israelites were not well regarded. They weren't thought of as strong and powerful. He could do the work even though they were like a loaf of barley to the rest of the people in the surrounding nations. Do you see how the dream depicted it for them? So, let's have a look at our dream. When we go through our dreams and look at the different aspects of it, we'll be able to see that God is wanting to encourage us through the dream. He's wanting to speak to an area of our life, giving us guidance and showing us the way to go, how to deal with it, how to think through it from a different perspective. We then can relate to it in our waking life. Okay? So I want you to look at your dreams that you've got now. Have you been able to, first of all, identify where you were? Can you tell me where you were? Are you that confident? If you're not, don't worry. It takes time, so don't be stressed about it. But does anyone know where your opening scene was? Yeah, where were you? In the backyard. Okay, interesting. There you go. Backyard. So what have we learnt about the backyard? Your relationships with friends and family. So it's not public, nobody else sees it. It's about your relationships and your relaxing and sharing relationships with your friends and family. Good, excellent, well done. How you relate to it though. So it's still about you. Okay, the dream is how you relate to your friends and family, how you entertain them, how you relate with them. Good, excellent. What about Helen? Were you able to remember one of your dreams? You have lots of them, don't you?
I've had a few lately.
Which one did you pick?
Yep. About being in my family home.
Right. Was that the family home that you grew up with? Okay. So were there particular people there?
There was a group of people.
Yep. Did you know them?
Not really. I was busy running around, sort of.
Okay.
But someone came in, which I told you.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want that person there, and I got angry.
Right.
And that person told me that my father
Mm-hmm.
had asked him to come.
Okay. So you were in the living room of the house that you grew up with? The kitchen. Okay. So think about it now. We know that it is about the relationships or the season of your life when you were little. So it's a foundational time. It's about a time when you were little, a little girl. Were you quite young at that time that?
16, 17.
Okay, so you were still growing in independence, yeah? But very much so, the dream had your father in it. Father is always generally important because the relationship that we have with our father is very, very impactual or impacts the relationship we have with our Heavenly Father. They're very, very related. If you have a troubled relationship with your earthly father, you will often need to do a lot of healing with your relationship with your Heavenly Father because they overlay a lot. And so definitely that relationship with your father is important, and the other people may have just been other family friends.
They didn't sort of stand out.
Yeah, it were the words that were spoken. Good, okay. So hold on to that. Definitely about those early memories. Manuela, do you remember?
There was this stone wall,
Right?
and it was out in the middle of maybe like Afghanistan or somewhere like that.
Yep.
I know they were Muslims or Arabs.
Okay.
And they were the ones shooting at me.
So it was a battlefield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was hiding behind a little wall, but
Yep.
yeah, it was some kind of battle.
So it was a battlefield.
And the guy was just going,
Yes. So in many ways, the battlefield is often symbolic of spiritual warfare. What's happening in the spiritual realm, and the battlefield, when I say the battlefield, that largely happens in our mind because the devil plays with our mind. That's where he does his battle. So that battlefield is very much, that's what the dream is about. It's about the battle that is being raged in your mind at the moment and the different things that are attacking. Well done, that's good. Sharon,
Sorry.
Yep.
Could it be related with what's going on in Gaza and all that?
Not likely. I'll tell you why. Well, no, let's not go there. Ask me that at the end and I'll talk to you about why. That's not to say that if you were watching on television the wars in Gaza and then you went to sleep and visualised the same scene, it's not to say that that didn't get overlaid, but the dream's not about the war in Gaza. It's about how that war is playing in your life. But we can be influenced by images that we see and they'll enter into our dream. That's completely normal. That happens all the time. Yeah. Sharon, did you want to mention an opening scene from any of your dreams?
The woman standing in the middle of a white sandy, huge open space.
Okay, lovely.
Surrounded, I can't see anything else but all these vehicles.
Vehicles?
And I'm looking in on.
Oh, interesting. So she's standing on a sandy beach. No, sandy place. White sand. Vehicles are all surrounding her parked and she's in the middle.
Flashing lights, trucks,
Right?
all sorts of
and you're watching this. Okay, and you're watching this woman. Did you know the woman? Okay.
I was seeing her from the back.
Right.
Or if she had something like a gun or a knife.
Did she do anything?
I wasn't sure.
Did she do anything?
No. But there were the red and blue lights flashing.
Right.
Then a guy got out of the humongous truck.
Yeah.
With a knife in his hand.
Ah.
And shouts.
Uh-huh. Okay, so she's been threatened.
He shouted something.
She's been threatened though.
No, somebody shouts out. The shout goes up, killer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the man gets out of his truck.
Okay. Okay, hold it for...
Throws down a knife
Yeah.
and shouts, "Why should I kill her?" and walks off.
Mm.
Someone explains that to her.
Okay. Okay. So the opening scene isn't as obvious in that one, only because we'd need to step in and think, did you recognise the place in any way? Did you recognise that white sandy place? No. Okay.
The outside was all dead.
Yeah. Okay. We'll need to give that more attention because I'm not immediately seeing a connection with a particular scene, but that's okay. Let's keep going. We've got home, a backyard, we've got home, we've got a battlefield, and we've got a sandy place with vehicles. And yours is a little bit different, Sharon, because you're watching it. Did you interact with the lady at any stage? You're watching it, okay, so that's slightly different. Okay, so next let's have a look at the dominant action, what you were doing, okay? So you were in your backyard. What were you doing in your backyard?
Oh, well, we going up steps, went into the house,
Okay,
but not the house that we live in.
right.
And I have my two granddaughters who are cousins.
Mm-hmm.
But this strange boy came down the side of the house in black and white striped kilts.
Right.
And he seemed to know my older granddaughter because he wanted her to come to the river.
Uh-huh.
And he had just come from drum practice. First I was watching it all, then when I got to the house I was part of it. And I sort of tried to encourage her to go, she wouldn't go. He got inside, somehow sitting at the kitchen table and he's drumming.
Mm-hmm.
Table.
Mm-hmm.
My brother walked past and picked up who can play the drums, played that on the table and walked away and we were surprised. And of course we went into what was my bedroom in this new house and it felt strange.
Mm.
That's when I started to take part in something I wasn't meant to be doing. We were living up on the main road. The house is strange, I can't understand what
Oh, that happens all the time. Yeah.
There was a fire all of a sudden
Yes.
in the paddock.
Right.
outside. At first it was calm, and then it started to light the windows, but it wasn't red flame, it was black.
Yes.
From then on I started painting a rush.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. So think of what you were doing.
In that dream.
Mm-hmm.
I said we'll have to evacuate.
Yes. So you're needing to get out because there's some form of threat. So you're needing to act quickly, get out because yes, and the settlement of the backyard and being in your home is being completely disturbed. Yep. Okay. Now I'm actually going to say to our lovely live stream people, it is wonderful that you joined us tonight. We're going to now apply some of the things we've learnt to the dreams that we wrote down I encourage you to do that using the record that you've got or dream it right down, to go through that process on your own. And then if you need anything or you'd like any assistance, you can just come and see me. The links are all there. I look forward to helping you with understanding your dreams, and I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at the same time, where we talk about overcoming obstacles like, I can't remember my dream, or I don't dream anymore, or what do I do about when I have nightmares all the time. That's what we're going to talk about next week, so I look forward to seeing you then.